So the first section that I'm going to be talking to you about is called Why Early Intervention. So I think it's clear that most, if not all, psychologists really do believe that the earlier you intervene, the better. And I suppose it's because in the early weeks and months and even the first few years of a child's life, when you make small shifts in the parents' attitudes and in the relationships between the parent and the child and in the child itself, it actually goes a long way often to changing the whole trajectory of a child's development, much more so than when you intervene later in a child's life, or obviously in adult years where it can take years for anything to change. So actually most psychologists are really keen on the idea of early intervention. You know, infancy and early childhood, particularly from a psychoanalytic perspective, are really seen to be the foundation of mental health. There's a nice quote by a man called Frederick Douglass that you might have heard, and it goes like this: "It's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men," or women, of course. And it brings me to another thought also about the importance of making these kinds of changes early on. There's a person, Professor Arnold Samaroff. He's a professor of child psychiatry from the USA, and he talks about something called the dynamic cascade model of substance abuse. But it's not just about substance abuse. It's about psychiatric or psychological conditions on a broader scale. And so if you think about it in that level, what he says is the best predictor of substance abuse or any kind of mental condition is adolescent peer problems. The best predictor of adolescent peer problems is adolescent parenting problems. The best predictor of adolescent parenting problems, child peer problems. The best predictor of child peer problems, early behavioral problems. The best predictor of early behavioral problems, early parental problems. So from his perspective, when you intervene at that level, the early parental problems, that has an impact on each of those layers, which in turn influences mental health, substance abuse, but mental health in general, of teenagers, school-going children, and adults. And Peggy O'Mara has also got a lovely quote. "The way we talk to our children," she says, "becomes their inner voice." And what this reminds me of course, is the internal objects, which you're probably familiar with the work of Melanie Klein and the other object relations theorists. So really the experiences that you have when you're very young, in the first few weeks and months and years of life, and those experiences and those relationships from the early times, they stay with you, they remain with you in your internal representations of the world. So you then see the world through that lens, and that of course influences how you are in the world and how your mood is and how your state of mind is and how you see other people and how you see the world. And in turn, the way then parents talk to their children and their attitudes towards their children and the way they relate and engage with their children really becomes the inner voice of the child. So for example, a mother who says to her child repeatedly, "Oh, you are so slow," and that child sees herself in that way. As the years go by, she sees herself in pretty much in the same way as she's been described as by her parents and the early caregivers in her life.